If the failure of the Xbox brand this generation isn't enough proof that exclusive games matter, then look no further than the death of handheld gaming. Now, let me address the elephant in the room because I know people are going to say, well, handheld gaming isn't dead because we have the Nintendo Switch. Nintendo Switch is not a handheld console, no matter what anybody says. Because when I think of a handheld console, I don't think of a console that only has 3 hours of battery life that automatically disqualifies itself from being an actual viable handheld system. But is it really portable? Sure, it's you can carry it around. You can bring it everywhere you go easier, and you can play it without having to have a television. But does that really make it a true handheld experience when you can't even fit it in your pocket? Game Boy, that you could fit in your pocket. The DS, 3DS, PSP. I can go on and on and on and on. These are handheld consoles that you were able to fit in your pocket and also didn't have an embarrassingly low battery life. If these handheld consoles all had a poor battery life, no one would buy them. They wouldn't be relevant. The only reason why the Switch is relevant is because this whole portable hybrid thing is a gimmick. It doesn't actually reflect reality. The system itself isn't actually a handheld console. It's not. You can hold it in your hands, but the portability aspect of it is just not there. It's not a portable console, especially with the battery life. You have to bring some charger with you or something the whole time, some portable charger. And at that point, it makes the Game Gear look like a more viable handheld experience than the Nintendo Switch. Because at least with the Game Gear, I was just barely able to fit it in my pocket. I was just barely able to fit it. It was a big piece of shit. And the battery life wasn't stellar. And you had to have 6 batteries on that fucking thing. But it's still a longer battery life than the Nintendo Switch is. You try to play a game on the Switch, and you're lucky if you get 2 hours on that thing. These are graphically demanding games. I know people are going to say, well, that's because they're graphically demanding games. Well, and that's the reason why we're getting into the real reasons why handheld gaming is dead. Because trying to integrate console gaming and handheld gaming is really, I think, the core of what killed handheld games. Not smartphones. People like to credit smartphones as the reason why handhelds are dead now, because the rise of the iPhone and Android. You have games like Angry Birds and all these other games, and the 3DS and all those other consoles, they just couldn't compete. If that was the case, then the 3DS wouldn't have sold 70 million units since it got released in 2011. And by 2011, smartphones already ruled the world. So I don't want to hear that smartphones are the main cause of handhelds dying, because that's just not true. And people try to look at the PlayStation Vita. It sold, the 3DS might have sold well, but the Vita was abysmal. It sold maybe 15 million units worldwide in 6 years. It's embarrassing. Well, that has nothing to do with smartphones. It has more to do with Sony's incompetence. That system released with not too many great selections for games. Let's be real. I remember because I bought the Vita at launch like a fucking idiot. So I remember the launch games. I don't even have to look this information up. You had Mod Nation Racers, Uncharted Golden Abyss. I think they also launched with Marvel vs. Capcom, which I already owned. So I didn't really want to buy the same game again. And by then they didn't have the cross play thing that they eventually added in. If you bought that, then you had to also buy another version of it, which I wasn't going to do. But I remember the only game I got on the Vita was Uncharted. I remember Mod Nation Racers, which I loved. I absolutely loved Mod Nation Racers on the PS3. They made a Vita version of it, and I'm like, oh my god, I gotta get it. And I went to GameStop, and they, in upstate New York, in the cities they're probably a little worse. Because I've lived in the city most of my life. I got the Vita launch when I was on vacation upstate. So I didn't actually go to my local GameStop. I went to some GameStop near my vacation home. And I will never forget how nice that guy was. I don't know if that GameStop is still open because I don't go to GameStop anymore. I don't go to buy physical games anymore, ever. Just because there's pretty much no purpose of it anymore. Considering that you still have to install the game no matter what. I mean, that's the big thing that killed physical media for me on consoles. It made it less viable. Because typically, when you think of physical media on a console, you think pop in and play. But this generation, that it definitely wasn't the case. You have to install whether you have a disc or not. So I'm just like, fuck it, I'm not buying disc anymore. But back then, when the Vita came out, I used to go to GameStop all the time, and I remember I pre-ordered. I never pre-ordered the console. I just checked to see if they had it. I didn't know if they were gonna have any Vitas. I went to Walmart first, and they had the Vita, but they didn't have any games for it. So I decided to go to GameStop to see if they had any games, and they did. They had Mod Nation Racers, like I said before. And the guy was so nice. He was actually like upfront with me. He's like, "Hey, I'm just letting you know. Like, we have the game, and we could sell it to you, but I'm just gonna let you know there's no online on this game." And my jaw pretty much dropped. I mean, maybe that's an exaggeration. My jaw probably didn't drop, but that's the way I felt. I was like, "What? There's no multiplayer in this game?" He's like, "Yeah, no, they didn't have any multiplayer, but they didn't put any multiplayer in this game." And I remember, I'm still grateful that the guy saved me $50, I believe, because I think that's what the game's launched for, 50, or maybe it was 40. But still, this guy saved me a lot of money, because if I got that Mod Nation racing game and it didn't have online multiplayer, which is what I loved the most about Mod Nation, it was playing online races against people and sharing tracks with people online. I'm like, Mod Nation Racers without multiplayer? How is that even Mod Nation Racers? So, yeah, the Vita's launch was very weak, pretty much. And I ended up not playing too many games on the Vita. My Vita is collecting dust as we're speaking. I remember the most I've ever used out of my Vita, I played Uncharted, but then that got old pretty quick because Uncharted did not have any multiplayer. And that's the thing. You have your PlayStation Network, and you, Sony, at the time, were like, I mean, I guess you still are, the masters of online gaming. You guys are part of the reason why online gaming became what it is today. Sony and Microsoft completely revolutionized online gaming as we know it today. So they have the infrastructure to have online capabilities on the handhelds, especially since they advertised this 3G feature, which was exclusive to T-Mobile customers. I remember when they announced that at E3 2011, and there were just boos all over the place when they made that announcement that, yeah, if you aren't a T-Mobile customer, you're shit out of luck. You can't use the 3G. But the Vita was definitely online capable. There were some online multiplayer games, like Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified. That was the only one I could think of. There might have been a few other ones, but I wasn't interested in any of the games that they released, because this is what the Vita's library consisted of within the first year. It was re-releases of console version games, so it was pretty much console ports. So the console ports included Marvel vs. Capcom, and later in the year they included later in its life cycle, maybe around 2013, it was just nothing but ports. So you had Telltale games, which is, oh yeah, I'm gonna play a Telltale game on my Vita, even though I already own it on my PlayStation 3. Why would I get the Vita version? And it's also on iPhone, so there's that. And then Borderlands, okay, like I said, I already have that. Why am I gonna buy games that I already own? You know what I mean? It's just this. That's really what killed it. That's really what killed. Part of the reason what killed handheld gaming is that Nintendo was the only game in town, and they were doing well, and they're still doing well with the handheld market. Prior to the Switch, the 3DS was doing well. But what ended up really killing handheld gaming was just awful decisions that Sony made, not having a strong library. Because I guarantee you, if the games were amazing, they would have continued to do well. The evidence indicates that. The Switch, even though it's not a handheld console, it's advertised as one, and it's selling amazingly, partly because of that. Also, obviously, because it has Zelda and those games. But the 3DS, again, it came out at a point where smartphones already took over, and it sold very strong units. 70 million units. So smartphones aren't the reason why. The fact that the second biggest handheld console manufacturer made a lot of dumb decisions and unofficially ended up dropping out of the handheld market. So you only had Nintendo. So when you have only one game in the town, then yeah, of course the fucking industry's gonna die. If there was, can you imagine if there was only one home console manufacturer? So only having Nintendo around, they're less inclined to actually put out a whole bunch of games out. And yeah, the 3DS had a lot of great games. They had Pokemon, and you had a variety of other ones, that Mario Kart. But and again, that's the greater point I'm trying to get at with the 3DS. The 3DS was great because it focused less on trying to port console versions on the handheld, like the Vita's doing, or like the Vita did. Now it's just the indie box, and it hasn't been relevant in at least 5 years. The Vita, because Sony did that themselves. It's not. It has no indication on how the handheld market is going. That's what I'm trying to explain to people. Because if you combine both of those consoles together, that's how much? 70 million plus 15 million is like 85 million. That's as many sales as the PlayStation 4 has gotten now. So it's a myth that the handheld market, that there's no market for handheld consoles. It's a myth. It's an absolute myth. It's not true. You're trying to tell me it's just a coincidence that the PSP and the Nintendo DS, that was the handheld's greatest generation, was that generation. The DS versus the PSP. They were both completely different consoles with completely different graphical capabilities, but they still were able to compete with one another because they both had games that were unique to that console. Pokemon, DS exclusive. You could only play on a DS. You cannot play the new Pokemon games, the new Pokemon Adventures on the Wii. The Wii Pokemon games sucked, by the way. They did have functionality between the DS and the Wii, but you had to have a DS, and those games are only playable on the DS. So that was a very smart thing Nintendo did, because there was still a reason to own a DS, even if you owned a home console, even if you didn't care about the aspect of handheld. Exclusive content matters. And sure, you can say it's because of the double screen, it's because of the touchscreen gimmick. It was revolutionary at its time. Gimmicks are important for attracting people into your console, but at the end of the day, if you don't have the games to back it up, it means nothing. I mean, do you think it's a coincidence that the PlayStation Vita only sold 15 million units and the PSP sold 80 million units? Oh, it's because of smartphones. No, it's not because of smartphones, because the PSP had so many experiences that you could only have on that console. Exclusive GTA games, exclusive Metal Gear games, exclusive games that attracted people to that platform, and that's something the Vita did not have. So why is handheld gaming dead? It's dead because they are focusing on the wrong things. The handheld console manufacturers, well, since there are none right now, I don't know if you can say anything about them currently, but what they decided to do, what Sony decided to do, was focus less on bringing exclusive content, quality exclusive content, by the way. There were exclusive games on the Vita, but they all sucked. Black Ops Declassified, Killzone Mercenary, it's just shovelware crap to try to sell your console, but they sucked. And they were straight garbage. Golden Abyss was great, but again, it kind of ruined the experience because they focused too much on their gimmick, and that gimmick, of course, was the touchscreen. And that's another thing that probably hurt the Vita a little bit, but probably not, because touchscreens are kind of a thing with handheld devices now. But within a year, Sony said, "Oh, well, the Vita's not doing well, so we're pretty much gonna give up on it." That's pretty much what they said. They said, okay, we're going to transition the Vita and make it more of a niche product. We're going to support indie developers. We're going to pretty much turn the Vita into an indie box with indie games. Yeah, like that's such a great idea, because every indie box out there has been very successful. There hasn't been a single indie box that took off. So that strategy completely failed. And it became an indie JRPG box. That's why it did so well in Japan, by the way. There's so many great JRPGs, but JRPGs aren't that popular in North America. And even if there is a market for it, most of those games weren't even localized. Persona 4 was localized, and it ended up selling well in North America, actually. But most of those games were in Japanese only, so good luck with that. So I think people definitely over-exaggerate mobile gaming, meaning Android, iOS, and that type of market, that they played a huge role in the decline, or pretty much death, of handheld consoles, dedicated handheld consoles. I completely disagree. I think the evidence indicates that it has more to do with the console manufacturers doing nothing to differentiate handhelds from consoles and from PCs. That's ultimately what happened there. I mean, Nintendo is kind of trying to do something with the hand, but they're not handhelds anymore. It's just a glorified console that has capabilities of playing games on the go. I don't consider the Switch to be a handheld console. It's not. Because if the Switch is a handheld, then the PS1 is a handheld. You know, the one with the little screen on it, like the laptop PS1, then you can call that a handheld too. I don't think that's a handheld. I don't think no, handheld gaming is dead. No matter what people try to say, oh, the Switch is handheld. It really isn't. It's just a glorified gimmick, like I said. And this integration between handheld consoles and home consoles is really what's killing the handheld market. Now they're merging these two industries together, or at least attempting to, or having no way of differentiating the two with the Switch, and it's just killing the industry. It's absolutely killing it. You know, the console industry has their exclusive content that you can only play on those things. Nintendo's trying to merge those two together, and it's going to end up completely blowing up in its face. I mean, the Switch is doing well right now, but as soon as the PS5 comes out, the Switch is going to be completely dead. I mean, it released in between a very bad time, a time when Sony was dominating with the PS4, and then the PS5 is also going to release soon and is also going to take the industry by storm. Mark my words. So, yeah, it's going to get the Switch is pretty much, it's doing well right now because it's at a point where PlayStation has lost its momentum a little bit, but ultimately when the PS5 comes out, it's going to take right back off, and the graphical disparity between the two, it's just going to make the Switch die because there's no way the Switch is going to last 5 more years. No way. Or maybe it will, but all of its third-party support will die, and all of its sales will go right down, take a nosedive. So, yeah, handheld gaming's dead. It doesn't have to be. It could have its own exclusive content, like it did back in the day, and actually attempt to differentiate it from the other mediums of gaming. But no, they're not doing that. So, handheld gaming's dead. It's a shame. It doesn't have to be that way, but it is. And it has nothing to do with smartphones.